Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about the top 5 loadouts after the mid-season 1.34 update for Warzone. Obviously, I can go through all 10. I've talked about the bottom 5 loadouts and how they're used. My experimental class, my restock class, ghost, restock ghost, and with fully loaded for those specific scenarios. But we'll focus on the top 5 loadouts because this is ones that people seem to have the most questions about when it comes to the AUG, FFAR, M16, Mac-10. And those are mainly the ones that really have changed as of this update. Obviously, the Kar98 and Amax, pretty much tried and true loadouts. We're going to cover all those, and I'm going to explain why there's so many different options when it comes to the FFAR and the Mac-10, and obviously it goes back to player skill. If you do learn something new, enjoy the video, please do me a favor, hit the like button. Goal on today's video is 10,000 likes. Hopefully you guys can slaughter that like you have been doing on the channel. If you do enjoy the content, if you're brand new, want to find your way back, just double check, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on, because we are on the road to 900,000 subscribers. So let's go ahead and go through it. I've already covered a lot of these bottom ones. The first one we're going to go ahead and talk about is the Amax Mac-10 build. This is kind of like just so I can include both the loadouts, and these are ones that you could actually stack together in the current meta that you're not running a double rifle. Some people are against double rifle for whatever reason. You run out of ammo if you don't actually loot bodies, but in general, you're usually pretty fine. It's just something you kind of get used to because the reserve is pretty good. Double SMG, not so much, not enough reserve. Amax is pretty standard build, monolithic, Zodiac, commando foregrip, 45 round mag, and then a VOK optic. Some people use the holographic sight, but since you're using SMG for your close to close medium, you're pretty much going to be set using that for that. And this one will have that optic for a little bit further range. When we get the Mac-10, this is going to be used agency suppressor, task force barrel, field agent grip, 53 round mag, and then the Raider stock. You could use the combat stock or no stock. It really depends on what you want. Obviously, the no stock is going to give you a little bit better sprint to fire time without as big a hip fire penalty. If you're a hip fire, if you like to hip fire, sometimes I'll go with that. Combat stock is pretty good, but you do get moving pretty quick. If that's a little hard for you to manage, then there's kind of how you go. And then this one helps with the sprint to fire, which generally the Mac-10 has a slight issue with because it does have an open bolt delay. Doesn't necessarily impact the open bolt delay because there's always that, but it tacks on to the other part of it that kind of ruins the sprint to fire time. So that's kind of that build. We'll talk a little bit about attachments, and this will explain some of the stuff when it comes to the FFAR. When it comes to the different attachments, I went through and tested the bullet velocity. I still have to test a little bit more on range, but when it comes to this specific examples, it's really irrelevant. And we'll explain kind of why that is. We have the base bullet velocity and then the strafe speed. And this is with the individual stocks that I'm going to talk about. So either if you go with the Raider stock or the combat stock, this is kind of a general number. And then we have the FFAR and the Mac-10. Generally for longer range weapons, if you're going to use them for long range, bullet velocity becomes a little bit more important. If you're going to be using something like an SMG, generally, like, it should be more important that the range is valued, or a combination of both depending on your play style. In addition to that, if you're using something for close range, strafe speed is incredibly important, and it's going to indicate which attachments you should be using if you're going to be using a weapon in a particular way. I'm setting all that up because it becomes very important when we get into the individual loadouts for the FFAR, because there's like 3 or 4 different builds depending on your skill level and how you plan to use the weapon, whether it's going to be a sniper support or it's going to be used like an SMG, which is a huge difference between the 2 different builds. So one thing that we're going to look at here is obviously bullet velocity. The Ranger is going to give you the most. This is without the agency suppressor, so that bumps it over 1,000 if you're looking just for the max bullet velocity. And this generally has a decent range anyways of about 36 meters. So any additional is going to allow it to compete because you're generally not going to challenge people above 40 meters. And if you get any additional, it's going to push it beyond that, even with just the monolithic suppressor or the agency suppressor. One thing I will explain is there is a little bit of misconceptions when it comes to the field agent grip and the SFOD speed grip. Obviously, the field agent grip is going to help with your horizontal and vertical recoil. But it also hinders your ADS movement speed. So that's your strafe speed. But the SFOD speed grip, it says it hinders your movement. Anytime it's general movement, that's also going to impact your ADS movement speed or your strafe speed because you're not sprinting. So the actual impact on the SFOD speed grip will make you a little bit slower, your strafe speed, about 1.5%. 2% slower, or twice as big a penalty than the field agent grip. So if you're debating on choosing one over the other, primarily because of the strafe speed, you're going to want to go with the field agent grip. or go with no grip at all because you're going to be using it close range. When it comes to the actual recoil, we end up with some pretty big recoil penalties with the task force, which we're used to, but this doesn't create such a big issue, especially if you're going to be using this as an SMG and you're really only going to be challenging targets up to about 25, 30 meters. If you're particularly skilled, then you can take it to another level and go a little bit further with it. But your secondary or your primary is going to be an AUG or something that's dominant for range, like we saw with the Amax. So we kind of have that built in there, and we see this trend continue with the field agent grip. And the task force is going to increase that strafe speed significantly. So that's one of the main reasons you're going to see a lot of people run that despite the recoil penalty, but they're also using it SMG. So it kind of gives you different options, what you want to use. Reinforced heavy will slow down your strafe speed. Maybe you don't like that much strafe speed, especially on keyboard and mouse. If it's harder for you to track side to side, you might not want that, but you make yourself a harder target to hit, which is the main pro of that. You're not looking to beam people at 50 meters with this unless you're just an absolute god at the game. It's going to be a little bit of a struggle to beam people unless you're going to be running the reinforced heavy, which just doesn't have as much strafe speed. But in terms of bullet velocity, it's the same as the task force. So you kind of got those trade-offs of what you want to use and why you want to use it. Now let's actually get into attachments to kind of explain one of the other attachments that people are going with, especially after this update. When we jump into the AUG Mac-10, it's pretty much going to be the same attachments that we've seen. Most people shouldn't really be using the 54 round mag. I know when I do a lot of spectating randoms, this is the one that most people have, but the ADS penalty is a huge difference. And if you look at Warzone rank, the KD is higher for players that run the 45 over the 54. And I think a lot of that has to do with the huge ADS penalty that you're getting for these, where it's like 100 milliseconds in some cases, even more. And 45 bullets is plenty. You can take down 9 different players if you get, or maybe 7 different players if you get all 2 burst. And in reality, if you're only going to challenge 3 or 4, maybe mixing something, you get time and reload. 45 is plenty for a gun that is this strong without a damage drop off. And then we just use the 3X, and that's pretty much how it goes. Strike team, despite its bullet velocity not being mentioned, it is still the best, even over the task force, which it says it helps out with that. But this one gives you also the fire rate. So you got multiple bonuses there, plus the aim, walking, movement speed, which is that strafe speed. So you got all kinds of buffs there. Effective damage range, it doesn't actually matter since this thing doesn't have a drop off. Aiming stability kind of matters. There's a little bit of idle sway, but at the end of the day, you're just bursting, reset, burst, reset, burst. Pretty straightforward. So that's how that works. Mac-10, pretty much the exact same build for the reasons I explained. You get those options there. You're going to have more recoil. If you want to go ahead and drop the field agent grip, you could actually go ahead and go with just a speed tape. That will speed up your ADS by a small amount. I did a full video on that if you want to go and check it out. And the serpent wrap also helps while hurting your sprint to fire time. So maybe you use this one for a little bit faster ADS, and you combine it with the Raider stock or the no stock, so you're canceling out that penalty you get from the sprint to fire time. So you do have a couple different options. Again, it does come down to preference. I know sometimes I'll be in people's chat and people say, JGOD said use this. Well, I don't actually say what to use. I give you the different options, and then you kind of make a decision for yourself based off your play style, your skill level, that makes sense for you, the individual player. Just because so-and-so streamer's using it, they are a god tier player that is exceptional at the game. So there's different things that maybe they can pull off that maybe you as a casual, a lower end player, or even a top tier player, maybe not be pulling off because you're not in the top 0.00001% of players. Other than that, you know, you kind of have the option. So you do get a little bit of freedom with your attachments, keeping in mind that the SFAR speed grip is good for that horizontal if you want to straighten that out. But it will slow you down in terms of movement for both movement and as well as strafe speed. That's going to bring us to the FFAR car build, and this one is more a sniper support build. So it's not going to be as much recoil and as much strafe speed, because essentially the difference between the reinforced heavy and the task force is the recoil and the strafe speed. So it really comes down to what you want. Obviously, they removed the takedown barrel as being what it was before with the strafe speed, bullet velocity. So you're losing out on those. So it really comes down to having a sniper support. I'd go with this because less recoil, so you're going to be a little bit more consistent with your shots. You're going to be using this for a little bit further ranges, maybe 45, 50, 55 meters, and then you're sniping everything beyond that. So you got to balance that out. Field agent grip is still going to help with the recoil. You got to use the 50 round mags now, because if you go with the 50 round fast, it's not really helping you out that much in terms of actual reload, but the penalty to ADS speed is significant. Then we have the Raider stock, obviously it doing its thing with strafe speed. So that's that particular build. Kar98, pretty straightforward, plenty of builds. First 4 attachments are pretty standard. monolithic suppressor, SingGuard custom, tac laser, sniper scope. And then this one, people change out for precision, sport comb. They change it for the stippled grip tape, which doesn't really make as much sense because sprint to fire time isn't all important unless you're no scoping. If you're quick scoping, it's not going to help nearly as much as something like this. Or you can go with one of the perks, but the perks are currently broken, so I would avoid using those on your current build. So pretty straightforward there. Now we got the M16 FFAR. And this is when you're using the FFAR as a SMG, not a sniper support, not a rifle support. You're using it as an SMG, and so you're going to build it as such. You want the max mobility, the range, damage, whatever you can get out of it, so that you're not going to miss shots. But recoil is not a huge issue because you're not really challenging things at incredibly far ranges. M16, exact same build we had before, and it's going to be the exact same as the AUG because they ended up fixing the magazine, so now you get a longer penalty when you are ADS. So we're going to stick with the 45 round mag, straightforward there. And then now when we jump into this, it's going to sound a little unorthodox, but this is kind of how the build goes. Agency suppressor, you got the task force, so you're going to see this build with a lot of AUGs. If somebody's going to use it with the Kar98, they're going to be using maybe something else. Or maybe they're going to swap the serpent wrap for an underbarrel. But since recoil isn't a huge deal, if you can manage recoil for the gun, you're generally going to go with this route, and that's kind of how it goes. Some people are going no barrel, and they're doing recoil. So some people have a little bit more variety to it, but this keeps it pretty simple. Task force will give you that optimum strafe speed. You're not going to slow down your strafe speed with an underbarrel. Obviously, you can go with like something like the bruiser, which helps with the movement speed, which would also help with your strafe speed, which would also help with your hip fire. Or you can even go with this one here, the infiltrator, which is the movement speed as well. That would help ADS movement speed. Or you could just get foregrip, which isn't all that great, but it doesn't have the cons. So you got a few different options there. Serpent wrap, maximum ADS improvement, but it's going to hurt your sprint to fire, and then you swap that out. Obviously, Raider stock. Or if you're not really a fan of that ultra fast strafe speed, you can go with the CQB pad, which solves that same issue. So that's kind of a little bit more understanding why you'd use certain attachments in certain scenarios. I know some people, maybe if you're going to be doing solos or even duos, you can actually put on a 38 round mag if you really want to do that route, and then that'll speed up your ADS time even more. And for 12 bullets, it kind of makes up for it because you're not going to be challenging as many people. So you do have those options. Again, it's player by player basis and mode specific. If you're only playing solos, 50 round could be a little excessive. 38 might just be what you need. So you got to go ahead and kind of play it by ear. Jump into Plunder, experiment with some of the options that I'm explaining, and then you can kind of find out, yep, I can challenge people at 40 meters. I'm going to go ahead and keep no grip or whatever the case is. You got those options, which is going to be pretty much the same build that we mentioned. Agency, strike team, axial arms, field agent grip, 45 round drum. And then this one also is the SMG build where you're going to have the muzzle, 40 agency suppressor, task force, 50 round mag, serpent wrap, and then the Raider stock. So hopefully that kind of clears up how you should be using the individual weapons, how they're going to build into the meta. Obviously, the AUG got nerfed, but it really didn't have an impact on how deadly this thing is. FFAR, they changed attachments, so you kind of got to modify the builds. It does add a little bit more build diversity because most people were leaning towards 1-1 because the actual recoil wasn't a big enough issue. Now they've kind of solved for that, making you pick and choose how you want to build the weapon, but the TTK is just too good, and the stats are too good of the weapon that it doesn't really drop out of being the meta and just become top tier viable and open up the space. It's just not there yet. Hopefully we'll get another nerf on all three of these weapons in these top two, and then hopefully we'll see a little bit more build diversity in terms of using SMGs, shotties, snipers, other tactical rifles, maybe DMR, maybe the M4 will come into the mix, Odin, whatever. A little bit more build diversity other than a very strict meta that we currently have. Hopefully you guys did enjoy the video, learn something new. If you did, please do me a favor, hit the like button. If you're brand new, want to find your way back, double check, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Appreciate all the support. Thank you for watching as always. Have a great day.